A couple of years back, I used to work as an adoption specialist through the foster care system. If you don't know what an adoption specialist is, we would help kids find their forever homes, and then we would do the adoptions for family members as well as foster parents adopting kids through the foster care system. So that being said, as an adoption specialist, sometimes my kiddos were not always in the area that I worked or lived. So we would have to go out and see the kiddos once a month as an adoption specialist. I was required to go out a little more than once a month to see one of the unmatched kids because we were working at finding this child a forever family. I won't say where because I don't want to give out any identifying information, but I had to drive pretty far to see this kiddo at a facility in a city that doesn't really have the greatest reputation. I decided to leave early due to not knowing where this facility was, and due to it being far away that I didn't know what type of traffic there could be. So I left early. When I got to the city, I looked down at the clock in my car and realized that I'm 2.5 hours early for my appointment with the kiddo. So I pull up my GPS and see what's around, and I see that there's a mall just about 8 minutes away from me. So I drive to the mall and then parked my car. As I'm heading inside, this man says something to me that I'm pretty or beautiful. I don't really remember. I didn't really take this as odd though at that point in time. Then as I'm walking more in the mall, I realize that this is a huge mall, and I realize that there's not a lot of people there and there's a lot of twists and turns throughout the mall. But I just decided that for whatever reason, I'm just going to go in Victoria's Secret and look at the clothing. I really like their pink brand, the sweatshirts and the leggings, so I decided to go in there. And I also had a return that I had to make in my car as well. So I go and purchase a really cute jacket from there, then made my return. Well, as I'm walking out, someone says something to me. I don't really remember what it was. I think it was just about my shoes or outfit. So I got a little uneasy because as I was walking, he was right behind me. I didn't know if he was following me or not, but I was just really nervous and scared. So as I'm walking out, he's still behind me. I then realized it was the same guy that I saw before as I was walking in the mall. He then starts to try and say something else to me as well. And when I turn around, the dude is walking behind me. Somehow, now there were also 2 other men behind him as well, so 3 in total. I then walked very fast to my car, got out on the main road as fast as possible, and just drove into the facility where I could then see the kiddo. I just went in there early and waited in the parking lot. Moral of the story is if you don't know an area well, always make sure that you have somebody to go with you before you decide to start exploring. Also, malls can be terrifying in general, especially when you're alone. There's a lot of blind spots for people who won't be able to see you, and there's a lot of places for people to hide and grab you. Please stay safe out there, everyone. This happened to me when I just started Shasta College right out of high school. I was 18 years old at the time, short and petite. I had just landed my first part-time job as a secretary. On Fridays, I really loved to go to the mall after work, especially on paydays. Back then, you could stretch $10 pretty far. On the day of this incident, I was walking through the mall to the bus stop when this dude wearing jeans, a blue t-shirt, and a backwards cap just stepped out in front of me all of a sudden. He stretched, stopped, and then waited for me to get even with him. He started talking to me right away like he knew me, and this kind of creeped me out. He was over friendly, asking me how my day was, that I looked nice, and what I was shopping for, and I just gave him short answers. I started to get uncomfortable when he wouldn't leave and ignored my attempts at being rude. There weren't that many people in the mall, no security guards, and all I had to defend myself with was a small purse and a bag of toiletries that I had just bought. This never happened to me before. I was alone and not very street smart. I felt myself sweating and my voice started to shake. He kept walking and talking to me. The conversation got even creepier when he'd asked if I had a boyfriend or if I was married, and stupidly I said no. Then he started making comments about my body, hair, and eyes, and how I could come work for him. He said he had a studio, which I didn't believe at all. I had to get back to campus for work, but I didn't want this creep to follow me and possibly get on the bus with me. So I did the only thing my 18-year-old mind could think of. I threw myself into this jewelry store and then ran toward the counter. I knew that I'd missed my bus, but at least I wasn't alone. The dude just stood by and kept walking. I was so relieved to lose him, but also frustrated at the same time because I'd be late for work. I hated him for even talking to me. He was gross and he smelled disgusting. Some time went by and I eventually forgot all about the creepy experience. I had a boyfriend now and I was hanging out at his apartment when the local news came on the TV. The reporter talked about a human trafficker who was arrested near the Shasta Mall. He was targeting and soliciting teens for sex work. I looked up and I saw the creepy dude on the TV screen in handcuffs, Lamont Brown. It all came back to me and I felt the willies all over again. I'm really glad that I only saw him once, and after that encounter I was a lot more careful when I went shopping alone. I think that he thought I was younger than I was because the report said that he was interested in minors. I've included a link to the news article and it'll be in the description. I really hope he never scares anyone again. About 3 months before the COVID lockdown, I had to unexpectedly find a new home. I'm a single mom of my daughter, who at the time was only 5 years old, and my nonverbal and autistic son, who was 4. Luckily, right before lockdown, a friend of a friend told me your uncle was renting out his farmhouse until he could sell it. Having no other choice and knowing a lockdown was inevitable, I accepted the offer. Now, this farmhouse was just over 3 miles away from the town where I lived. The typical UK country roads. No streetlights, and the nearest shop was 1.5 miles away. I don't drive, and the only reason I accepted the offer was because I knew because of the lockdown I wouldn't have to get my kids to school. A friend took us on the day of the move, and we only had personal items to really take as the farmhouse was fully furnished. The first thing I noticed was just how secluded it was. It wasn't like a regular farmhouse. The owner had replaced the old windows with full-length ones that totally covered one side of the house and then looked out onto a beautiful meadow, like a beautiful field full of wildflowers. It was stunning. Where the flowers stopped, at a guess, I'd say it was half the length of a football field. There was a small forest. Not a thick and dense forest. The trees had a person-sized distance in between each one, and with the sun shining through, it actually looked like something from a fairy tale. Apart from a very long, muddy driveway leading up to the house, the rest was surrounded by fields that seemed to go on for miles. After dragging our belongings onto the front wooden patio, my friend had to leave right away, so it was just me, Maggie, and Seth to explore our new temporary home. It had 2 floors, the living and dining room, large bathroom, and 2 bedrooms on the ground floor. Everything was either very old and farmhouse style, or very new and modern, and it didn't fit well with the old farmhouse, yet it was clean and I was grateful. An old open staircase in the corner of the living room led to one big room the size of the full ground floor, which also had the wall of full-length windows. It was big, warm, and full of light. I loved it, and I knew I was going to make it our living room area. Now, what I didn't start my story with is the reason for us moving. Just after my son's 2nd birthday, his dad passed away. It was an unexpected short battle with cancer. We weren't even together at the time and lived a 3-hour drive away. He wasn't the most law-abiding citizen, shall we say, but had a large group of very loyal friends, one which he called his brother. His name was Tommy. I'd only met him a handful of times but disliked him instantly. He had a look. I can only explain it as if a wild animal was lying in wait stalking its prey, and he never once took his eyes off me. That is, unless Seth's dad spoke to him or looked at him, then he'd quickly look away. A couple of times if we were left in the same room together even for a second, he'd instantly move a few steps closer and look me right in the eyes to make conversation. He made my skin crawl. Well, after Seth's dad died, Tommy decided to take it upon himself to look after us. And to cut a very long story short, well, it ended up with a restraining order and then a court case. All he ended up with was a slap on the wrist. After stalking, watching, and absolutely terrifying me for a year, and he didn't stop. Hence our quick, quiet move. Anyway, 2 microwave meals, 2 lots of clean bedding, and 2 bedtime stories later, both kids were snoring, and after pouring myself a long, large glass of wine, I locked up downstairs and went up to my favorite room. I'd heard on the local news that we were expecting a pretty bad thunderstorm throughout the night, and I couldn't wait to watch it with the view we had. The glow from the small electric fire and the fairy lights that I'd added around the room made it feel so cozy and safe. I pulled a big snuggle chair over to the windows along with a fluffy blanket, of course not forgetting my wine as well, and for the first time in hours picked up my phone to see 15 missed calls plus the voicemail flashing. Maggie had been using it to watch YouTube earlier and must have just turned the volume switch off. Most were from the friend who dropped us off, a couple from my mom, and then some unknown number. The first couple of voicemails were just my friend sounding frantic telling me to pick up. The third.
Hi there, this is DCI Jones. We have an issue. You need to double lock all your windows and doors and then call me back immediately.
Oh shit. My stomach sank. DCI Jones was the detective who helped me through the Tommy case. I ran downstairs while I was waiting for the 4th voicemail to play.
Hello, sweetheart. I'll see you very soon.
It was freaking Tommy. I've never felt fear like I did at that very moment. Not even when Tommy had me trapped in my own house, saying that he loved me enough to kill us both. I quickly picked up Seth and then half-dragged poor Maggie upstairs. Luckily, both were that tired that they snuggled together on the sofa and then went straight back to sleep. With my heart still pounding, I ran back downstairs, double-checking the windows and doors while trying to ring my friend. She picked up the phone, quickly crying.
Ricky, he followed me. I'm so sorry.
By this point, I was having a borderline panic attack. I grabbed my knife from the kitchen, sobbing hysterically, just thinking, this is it. I'm gonna die tonight. He's really gonna kill me. As I was running back up the stairs, my phone rang again, and thinking it would be the police, I picked up.
You look so beautiful, sweetheart. You couldn't have picked a better place to move because I can see everything through them windows.
Oh my god, shit. I quickly turned to look out the windows, and right past the field, at the very edge of the pitch black forest, I could see the very small light of a mobile phone. Everything happened so quickly after that. Flashing lights heading over the field towards the mobile phone light, banging on the front door, and the kids waking up crying to see me sobbing on the floor. When they finally caught Tommy, he had a rape kit with him, along with a gun and sleeping tablets. He was sentenced for just 2 years. And I got the phone call last month to let me know that he'd done his time. The kids and I moved over 100 miles away not too long after the court case, and we had to cut contact with everyone close to us. We were really lucky that night, but I know I'm gonna forever be looking over my shoulder. To start this story, I have to tell you a little about myself. I'm always to work early because I was raised that if you're on time, you're late. However, when it comes to anything else, I'm not a very punctual person. This particular morning, my husband was needed at church on time, so he took off separate from me and I stayed back to finish getting ready, and my goal was to sneak in right as service started. As my husband was heading out the door, I called out that I loved him and then snuck in for a kiss as he was on his way. I still had to find clothing and do my hair. I ran upstairs and picked up a top and a pair of joggers that were clean off my bedroom floor. Yes, I'm really terrible at putting away clean laundry. I ran into the bathroom and brushed my hair and then put on some eyeliner and mascara and then did my lipstick quickly. I took our puppy out to the bathroom one last time before grabbing my purse and car keys and then running for the door. As the door swung shut, I had heard my dog barking. I got into my car and turned on the ignition, and if you're like me, you can already see where this is going. If you guessed it, I didn't have any gas, So I drove them to the gas station and hopped out of my car to put some gas in the tank. Now, I always have my AirPods in my ears listening to something, not really paying attention to my surroundings. Well, after I slid the hose in the car and the gas started pumping, I got an uneasy feeling. I stopped what I was listening to and just scanned the parking lot. I then saw 3 men in a red truck with no backseat cab just staring at me. I remember it being so weird to me because they had the windows down with no music playing and not talking or pumping gas when they were in the gas pumping area. I just kept my glance at them while I hopped out of my car to take the hose out and then tighten my gas can. I was on high alert, not taking my glance away from those men, and they weren't taking theirs off me either. After I got back into my vehicle, I shut my door and locked it. These men did not once take their glance off me. I stayed in my car with the doors locked, not driving because I was terrified they were going to follow me. I tried to get a hold of my husband, but again, he was at church, so I knew there was a slim chance he would pick up the phone. I then sat there for 15 minutes waiting in my car. I then noticed a woman walk right out of the gas station and get into her car. I got a pit in my stomach just then as she started to drive, because so did the red truck. At the moment, I thought that I had a reason to fear those men. So she then pulled away and they went after her. I pulled out after them, and I was freaking out the whole time, in hopes that I was wrong and they would just choose to leave at the same time. Then, after about 6 minutes of driving, the woman pulled off in a mobile home park, and the red truck also turned into the mobile home park. I didn't know what to do. I was scared, but I did notice that there were lots of people outside in the mobile home park, so I didn't report it. But to this day, I'm still kicking myself for not reporting it. I'm still scared that one day I might run into them again, so I switched gas stations. I haven't heard anything on the news or seen anything on the internet to indicate those men being caught or those men doing anything else. The story takes place when I was 17 years old in a suburb outside of Detroit, Michigan. I'm 24 years old now. I'm a male and I was fairly thin when this story takes place. This provides some context for later. When I was a teenager, I went back and forth between my parents fairly often. Neither of my parents had much money, and they struggled to even put food on the table. At the time, I smoked weed a lot, and I really had no motivation or drive. So I did what I could to easily make money, which was to sell weed. I didn't have a car at the time, so I had to drive to my dad's house to buy, and I would walk it out to them. My dad was an alcoholic and pothead, so he either didn't notice or care what I was doing. I had a lot of regulars and repeat customers. I would sometimes get people adding me on Snapchat to buy, and usually the person referring them would ask first before giving out my information. One night I got a friend request from someone who I didn't recognize. I figured someone gave my information out and just didn't let me know. To set this scene, I'd often just play video games most of the night, and then get up and run some out whenever I got a text. I'd have them pull into the driveway, but not reversing in, so it would make it harder for them to drive off without paying. This night, it was just after midnight in November, so it was cold, windy, and pitch black outside. We had little to no street lights, just the scattered porch light that was left on. I got the text from the previously mentioned unknown person on Snapchat. All they messaged was, "Are you available?" I responded yes, but who is this? They told me someone referred me, and the name checked out as one of my regulars, so I asked them how much they wanted. It was a much larger quantity than usual. We agreed upon a price, and they said they were heading over. I got the text from them that they had made it. When I looked outside though, I saw no one in the driveway, even though I told them to pull into the driveway. I messaged them, "Man, I don't see you. Are you at the right address?" They immediately responded, "Yes, I'm parked in the road." I then messaged them again, "Well, can you pull into the driveway? It's way too dark to see in the street." I waited almost 10 minutes and got no response. So I made the poor decision to just go to them in the street. As I was walking out of my house, I noticed how dark the car was. It looked as if they had the engine off, which I thought was odd. As I got closer, I realized the windows were completely tinted and blacked out. The car also had a red racing stripe and the car was white. To paint a better picture, one side of the car was the road, and the other side was a patch of woods next to my dad's house. I'm approaching from the passenger side, so I'd have the car in front of me and the woods behind me. I was about 10 meters away from the car, and I noticed that the front and back passenger windows were cracked just enough to see their eyes looking at me. I could clearly see 3 eyes staring at me. They were all wide-eyed, which made me feel very uneasy. I stopped in my tracks just about 5 to 8 meters from the car, and I called out the name of the person on Snapchat. I didn't get a response. They just continued to stare at me, and I called out again. Again, no response. I wondered if they could even hear me, so I called out again louder. Still no response though. I then began to walk another step forward, when I then heard rustling behind me in the woods. I turned around and clearly saw what appeared to be a huge man creeping towards me just past the tree line. He looked like an offensive lineman. He was very huge. I looked back to the car and they were still staring at me. I started to back away and I heard loud sudden movements behind me. I did the only thing I could think to do, which was to sprint back to my house. I made it back to my house, locked the door, and then looked out the window, and they were still there. I saw the man walk out of the woods, go back to the car, and then get in the driver's side back door. They then just slowly drove off. I messaged them back on Snapchat on my phone, asking them what the hell was that. About an hour later, I then got a response.
You got very lucky. That's what happened.
And then they blocked me shortly after. This may not sound that scary to some, but I've never felt so scared in my life. I had way too much anxiety to sleep for the next few nights. Them knowing my address didn't help. Anytime I left my house, I was constantly on the lookout for that car. Then a week later, I had walked out to sell to a friend/regular. As I'm walking away after making the sale, I catch that same car from that night out of the corner of my eye. I could see them parked 2 houses down. The same car with the same tinted windows and racing stripe. I then went back inside and watched it from the upstairs window. Then a few minutes later, it drove away very slowly. I never saw or heard from them again after that.